Now, I am not saying this is something I expected, but I am not surprised. Hey everyone, my name is Aaron James. This is a review of John Wick Chapter 4, written by Shay Hatton Michael Fitch and directed by Chad Stahelski. I think a lot of people would admit that this is a franchise that was an unlikely blockbuster, right? The type of movie that it is to be as big and get as much appraisal as it does, I do not think it was very likely. It did not have all or much of the elements that a movie like 65 had, and 65 was a complete flop and failed to deliver that blockbuster experience, even with elements that would have elevated it to that level. With the John Wick franchise, especially by chapter 3, I got a bit worn out with it. I think because the fight scenes felt too long and the story felt too long, and the motivation for Wick's actions became so vague by chapter 3 that I was not sure what I was here for, and I would question that while watching chapter 3. And so I was a bit concerned going into chapter 4, considering it was 39 minutes longer than chapter 2. 30 minutes longer than chapter 3. My partner explained it best that the choreography or the fight scenes started to seem too clean. And the choreography is great. I think John Wick franchise has some of the best choreography ever that I think a lot of people will study and go to emulate or replicate those fight scenes and study how to make fight scenes feel real and without doing the millions of cut shots to make a fight scene seem climactic, and that scenes are much more climactic when it's a still shot or a moving camera of, a continuous shot of a fight scene. I think that was a flaw with chapter 3, that the motivation was so vague and I did not understand what the real goal or the real outcome John Wick was trying to get. With chapter 4, the movie is much better than chapter 3. I'm not sure if I like it more than the first two movies. I think, and I put the first two together just the way it feels continuous, and chapter 4 being right after chapter 3. But still being, it might be better. The movie stars Keanu Reeves, Donnie Yen, Bill Skarsgård, Lawrence Fishburne, Shamir Anderson. We have Hiroyuki Sanada, the late Lance Reddick, may he rest in peace. He had passed about a week prior to the release of this movie. We also have Ian McShane, who did not have as much screen time. He was cool in it. He was not in much. We had Natalia Tena, and I think her scenes were the least interesting. I felt that they were there just to guide John Wick or his character into a certain area. It did not feel, I do not necessarily know how to describe it, but her character and the story introducing her, it felt off. It just felt we need a device to get John Wick or the characters from point A to point B. And so that is why this scene felt a bit off. Even though her character, what she had John Wick do was a really cool fight scene. Clancy Brown is in it, and his character felt too television for me. So his character was there. He did not do much, so it was not an issue or did not take away from the movie. But if I thought about his character, even though I like Clancy Brown, I did not care for his character, what they gave to him to portray or play in the movie. Then Rina Sawayama, she did cool. She had a cool fight scene. She was not in it much after a certain location, but she did cool. It was good. I enjoyed it. So chapter 4 continues to follow John Wick after the first 3, and he's on another rampage, right? Going crazy, doing what he can to seek freedom from the table, right? From the high table, trying to find peace, which is what he's been seeking after getting his revenge in the first movie and been wanting that since chapter 2. I would like to give a shout out to Paco Delgado. He's a costume designer, and my goodness, I have never seen people look so good in suits since the John Wick franchise. Keanu Reeves looks sharp in his suits since the first movie, and I always want a suit when I watch the movies. Reddick looks good in his fit suit. Bill Skarsgård has some really nice shiny suits in this movie. I really enjoyed. Donnie Yen looks very sharp in his suits. The costume design in general is great with the maskless fig characters in the movie, that they're similar to the ones at the end of chapter 3 where they have that really nice armor that can take almost anything. And they have them here, but they designed the mask a bit more. Sawayama's character had a really nice suit and design, so did Sonata's. Shamir Anderson is also in the movie. I really liked his character a lot. They did not give him a nice suit. If you see in the trailer, he had like a yellow, brownish jacket, and he's walking around with the dog. He's the tracker. I liked his character. They do not really give the character a name, just Mr. Nobody. His character is fun. I was iffy on how much the character would be in the movie because I liked when they introduced him, but he's throughout the movie. He's with you till the end, and I really liked that because he was enjoyable, he was entertaining, he had cool action scenes. I do wish they gave him more action scenes or more times that we saw him actually doing something. But I was good with what he had, and I enjoyed the dog, right? There has to be a dog in John Wick movies. The difference between the fight scenes in Chapter 4 and Chapter 3 is the fight scenes did not feel too long in Chapter 4, and maybe the pauses in between the fights did not feel pointless. So it did not feel like the movie dragged on too long. It did not feel as long as Chapter 3 because you were moving through everything pretty quickly. And the dialogue and the moments when there are pauses, when the characters are talking to each other, it felt like there was a purpose to them and that they were moving the story along in an efficient way, and that I was understanding the motives of all the characters. And the characters were actually much more developed in this movie than previous movies outside of John Wick's character. Which brings me to the writing. Derek Kolstad wrote the first 2 movies by himself. He was the lead writer in Chapter 3 with bringing on Shay Hatton, who ended up being the lead writer in this movie. Him and Michael Fitch wrote this movie. On IMDb, Derek Kolstad does have a credit, but in the end credits for the actual movie, Kolstad's name is not up there. And you do feel that difference in tone here. Even the characters' personalities were a bit different, the characters that were brought in from the previous movies. I did not necessarily have an issue with that, even though it was noticeable, so that stood out. But the writing was a bit better here. Shay Hatton was able to give us new characters that had much better backgrounds, much better stories, backstories, and much better character development, even throughout this movie, that you actually enjoyed them and were much more interested in them. In the previous movies, we were introduced to Lawrence Fishburne, and he did have more screen time in those movies, but it felt that we were given just as much personality from him here as we were previously. Halle Berry's character in Chapter 3, although it was nice seeing her and seeing the dogs, that was pretty cool. The character development, with as much time as they gave her, did not feel as developed as other characters, such as Sonata's character here in Chapter 4. Now, the choreography, the fight scenes were amazing. Probably some of the fight scenes in this movie will be studied, like I said, in the future, and probably very iconic just because of how well they are done. It is very convenient to have someone like Chad Stahelski leading it, who was a stunt person previously, even for Keanu Reeves in the Matrix movies. And then you had David Leitch, who came on, I believe, as a guest director for the first one. And I say guest director because his name does not appear at the end credits of the first John Wick. I only know this because I watched the first 3 movies earlier this week prior to watching Chapter 4. Just wanted to get caught up, and I felt that maybe I'll like Chapter 3 a bit more this time around. Just being able to watch it at home still felt too long. Still, the fight scenes do feel a bit clean, and it becomes almost like a beautiful dance, right, that you would see on a play. But I enjoy it, right? It's something I very much appreciate and I respect because we do not see it often. I also have to give credit for allowing Donnie Yen to show his abilities and what he is capable of. Oftentimes in movies, when bringing in a person of color or a character from Eastern Asia specifically, even if they are known to be a big or international action star, right, who is very well trained in the martial arts, they do not give him often much to do. I think Donnie Yen was in other American movies outside of Ip Man, and he is not given much. Same with Tony Jaa. Tony Jaa was in the 7th Fast and Furious movie. had one scene, or a couple scenes, but I feel they underutilized him, and I think that happens often, and they bring the characters just for the sake of bringing the fan base, but they never really deliver. Here, Donnie Yen shines in all of his fight scenes. He did amazing. I liked his fight scenes much more than I liked some of John Wick's. Actually, most of John Wick's in this movie, I enjoyed Donnie Yen's a bit more. But it is a John Wick movie, so John Wick had a much more to do, and I really liked that. The cinematography is fantastic. So is the lighting. I've always appreciated the lighting and the style set design for these movies. Just brilliant. Chad Stahelski is improving as a director because, again, the cinematography and the shots are becoming better, and the scenes do not feel draggy, or they do not feel like something's happening too quick that you're not able to process it before you get to the next scene. Chad Stahelski has only directed the John Wick movies, so as far as his versatility and what he's able to or capable of directing outside of John Wick has yet to be seen, so I'm not too sure on his skills as much as I do enjoy these movies, so I am nervous to see him direct Ghost of Tsushima, Vice City, and Highlander. I will say this movie or this franchise is probably a good stepping stone for directors like Chad Stahelski, David Leitch, and the choreographers and all the stunt people involved in these movies, because David Leitch went on to direct Deadpool 2 and Atomic Blonde, which I think deserves much more credit and attention than it got. Granted, he did also do Hobbs and Shaw, but we will not talk about that. John Wick just might be one of the best action franchises ever. I try to think of other ones. Terminator 2 ended at T2. Same with the Die Hard movies, ended at the sequel. And I would not count Rocky as a franchise. It's a sports franchise more than an action franchise. Most movies, most action franchises, I would argue, start falling off by the third movie. And here, although the third movie was Rocky, I would say the majority or the general audience did really enjoy Chapter 3. So, and then Chapter 4, which I personally enjoyed, and I think a lot of other people did enjoy. I mean, this is a 4 for 4. Anyway, what did you think about John Wick Chapter 4 if you've seen it? Do you think they should probably work on a fifth one? Would they work on a fifth one? And could they work on a fifth one? Y'all let me know, and until next time, take care of each other, check up on one another, check up on yourself, and remember, potential has no limit.